record it. Yeah. Because I'm like, yeah,
Thank you.
I'm like, I need a
Thank
list,
you.
checklist, checklist. We need to make a checklist for the facilitator so that
Yeah.
all those pieces don't get.
Yeah.
Okay. So for now, we'll have Deb and Olive and me will be facilitators. And we'll keep seeking someone from South Bay Harbor, and I'll be happy to drop out. Anyway, okay, and then anything else that was on the minutes, and I know they didn't go out yet because Allison had just completed them.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And they will go up on the Google Drive, and then people will have a link to get them.
You know, there's just a huge meeting up in Mount Desert Island about a new boat, and they sent the minutes out to everybody, and they were like 17 pages long, and they were an exact discussion of what was happening. Like so and so
the transcript.
Okay, so and I said that is crazy that somebody typed that for like 2 hours, but apparently it's
Yes.
a dictation program.
It is, and somebody had told me about it recently.
Now, I don't know if it's going to be like my dictation in my car where I like, you know, it doesn't sound anything like what
it was tough
I
to
said.
honestly, the recording was really tough.
So
There was
that
a
probably
lot
won't
of
work.
I mean maybe it could work, but it was really tough to there was a lot of blank spaces where there was just like
Yeah.
so much noise that I couldn't. And I mean,
Usually
I
these
kinda guess,
recordings
but-
are pretty good if it's a Zoom recording, because I actually will use the dictation on Word for it, but there's no punctuation. And I know the program that you're talking about because it's specifically designed for transcription from Zoom. But it's like, you know, $18 or $9 or something a month. So not something that I need for my work.
I mean, I'm happy to pay it. Just it's taking notes is a pain in the neck.
I've never done anything
Yeah.
like this before, and I don't mind learning how to do new things. Yeah, I don't mind doing it. It'd be great
Yeah.
to have another tool.
Well, and the thing with the
as backup.
transcript is that you always get more. Because you get the actual conversation and the words that were said. Versus a summary or overview, which is what people do when they take notes, and you don't have to sit for video. I often will put the video on to listen to while I'm, you know, doing other things. Yeah, same thing, but I can put the videos up on YouTube and make them accessible so that we have a way for people to easily get them. Okay. All right. Anything else with the minutes? I'm gonna just keep scrolling down. We're gonna go, we have a new set of on our agenda, so there's our agenda. So that's our leadership and structure. Roles and responsibilities for the outreach group. I don't know if there's anybody here from outreach.
Well, I said I would help with that.
Okay.
But once again, it's something I'm going to learn from scratch. Pauline was going to do time on that. But, that was also dang. So I'm pretty sure, you know, those offers were for the Google Docs and organizing all the information and the matrix and keeping the email communications. I think they were more talking about like that sort of technological stuff, because I like organizing files and things like that. That's not something I do on a regular basis. So I didn't opt for that, but that's kind of their work. So it's easy for them to put those things in the right buckets, you know? Yeah, they weren't, they were not talking about it.
Okay. Because the outreach is like the postcards, and reaching out to and I would love to put something out of order and talk about future meeting location.
Yes.
So I know you had offered previously to host at Bigelow. The Y is another option. So, you know, obviously this was we had to make a decision on short notice because Dan said the he couldn't attend, and town hall was not the option, or town office. So, and nobody responded a whole lot. So it was like, okay, if we're gonna have the meeting that is scheduled, then we gotta have a place. And
If the
so
Y can do it, that's probably the most convenient for,
I think it is, and it'd be easier to attract people from Booth Bay Harbor if it's at the
I
Y.
think, yeah.
So, other people's thoughts about location for future meetings that's accessible to everybody in the community?
I love the wire.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Okay,
we just have to get through. I don't know where, I don't know what's
I don't
available
know
right now
where.
because they're under construction, but they've got
Yeah.
to be getting close-ish to having.
Isn't it supposed to be done in October?
yeah, but we have another meeting in 2 weeks,
Right.
so. But, you know, I'm sure they still have a meeting room, and we can, and we'll go from there, and if it doesn't work, then we can reach out to you. Unless somebody has another location in Booth Bay Harbor that they think is reasonable.
So the town hall is off limits completely?
Well, I mean, it's probably accessible, but not the recording, and their internet has been problematic for whatever reason. So Zoom has been difficult. So,
The school, that'd be just totally, open
Yeah, I think
the wild to it, or
Yeah.
kind of, that would be.
even if we had this meeting, I'm sure there's, you know what, I'm sure there's.
Yeah. I'm sure there is. Okay, so
I
who
bet you'd
wants
get
to-
more people going. to it.
I think we would, and I think, yes. Who wants to reach out to the Y?
I'm happy to.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay. So, if, I'm gonna just stop sharing for a second and just see, is there anything that people, on Zoom would like to share or provide any feedback before we go look at the matrix? Anybody have questions?
I'm just gonna sit back and listen for a while.
That's absolutely fine, not a problem. Go ahead, Trish.
On Sunday, they are having a MLA, which is the Maine Lobstermen's Association
Yeah.
group meeting over at Brady's 3 to 6. And I plan on attending and maybe hear something from the lobster community as well.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate that. Somewhere I have the matrix, where is it? All right, I'm gonna have to find it. Go away. Go away for a second. There.
How many people
There
maximum
we
do you think we would get to one of these things? I'm sending Allison a good one email right now.
You know, that first meeting that we had way back in the beginning, there were a lot of people.
Fire station,
No, I'm
That one
thinking at
opened
the
up that-
Y,
the
but,
Y, yeah.
but I think in terms of actual working meetings, that people will, I'm gonna have to move it first. I'm thinking that people will probably not want to attend a whole lot. I will tell you that when I was on the comprehensive plan committee, we would have maybe 3 or 4 people in the audience. So it's,
So if I said 10 max or like 10 to 20 max,
I
that
would
would-
say probably 10 to 20 is realistic.
So if we're gonna be putting something in the newspaper, and I mean, I've been talking about putting like a sandwich board,
Yeah.
you know, in front of my store that says we're having a meeting tonight, which was I was gonna do today at the town hall. I mean, who
Right.
knows, you know, we could get a lot more people.
We
We could be
could,
informed about what's going on with the windmill and what, you know, where this group, we're trying to, you know, reach out to see what kind of benefits you guys want. And, you know, I didn't do it because the venue changed. I didn't know where
It's
to
a
tell
lot,
people.
right.
I'm like, I'm like, how am I supposed to make a postcard if we can't talk, like, how are we
Right.
supposed to do any of this?
Which is why we need to find a
So
location.
we do.
that's-
We need
it's
it, it needs
stable.
to be stable. Cause that's like, I feel like if they've got all these moving parts, I mean,
They never know.
we're
where
not gonna
go.
get anywhere. It's so
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. And, you
Okay,
know,
so it could be more than 20.
it could be, but typically you're gonna get more than 20 when you decide you're gonna have something more like a public hearing. So if there was a decision about the matrix, here's what's gonna happen, we're looking for your feedback. People tend to respond more, right? So, that's just my prior experience working with the comp plan and then the public hearings, we got bigger groups and we really were seeking input, but didn't get a whole lot. Trish, what's your experience for Bouffay Harbor?
As far as people attending meetings,
Yeah,
uh, not great. Oftentimes we have a town hall meeting once a year and we get at max 25 or so. And at that meeting, we're voting on the budget for the year.
yeah,
And so it's multi-million-dollar budget that we are talking about and only 25 people are in the room.
right, okay.
So, which you would think would drive people in there. But it doesn't. So I mean, I don't know exactly what's the best course of action. I mean, you just kind of have to figure out, I guess, the best time for the meetings. And maybe some kind of enticement, if you will, like coffee and donuts. I don't know. Because I mean, if people aren't attending a multi-million-dollar budget approval, I don't know how much you'll get them to do this. And I hate to say that, but it's like people oftentimes are the Monday morning quarterback. They'll won't even pay attention to what's going on when it's going on. And then when a decision is made, that's when they start coming out of the woodwork saying, oh, well, we didn't know about this or this, that, and the other thing. So, I mean, obviously you want to be get as many people involved as humanly possible, but it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, especially in the summer months, I think.
Right. But, I mean, we'll have one more meeting before it's September and hopefully we'll, have enough structure at that point that when people come, they'll be able to ask their questions and we'll be able to actually give reasonable responses. So hopefully, and I love your idea of a sandwich board in front of your shop. So Allison is,
I just need to know what to put on it. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't want it
yeah.
to be, I want it to be ask questions, but
Right.
I don't want it to be I don't want to cause problems,
Right,
so
yeah.
it needs to be,
yeah. So we're just not
Educational.
quite there yet.
so
We're not quite there yet. We're just getting there slowly.
I bet you the Y would have a couple of different options. Although I haven't been, I've been in the field house a bunch. I haven't been on the other side.
I've been on the other side, but only for the pools. So
and there, I mean, even the meeting room next to the upstairs next to the pool.
Pool, that
I
would
bet
be
you that's
fine.
still available.
Yeah, that
because
would be fine.
They're not doing construction there, so I'm
Yeah.
sure we could do that.
Yeah. Okay, so can people actually see this matrix? Is it too small? If you need me to make it larger, please let me know. I can find my mouse. I'm gonna leave it this size unless there's a complaint so that we can see as much as possible. So the things that are on the table at this point are sewer expansion. So we're glad you're here, Chris. Road and traffic safety improvements, electric utility and fixed utility contract. And I actually put over here, I put the other entities and funding, which now needs to go down below because that was because we switched the direction of the matrix. And I missed the last meeting, so I hadn't seen the direction change yet. So, and so one of our jobs is to continue to complete the matrix because it's what's going to help determine what the choice is, where we go, what we present to NIA, so that they can provide feedback. So Chris, I would love to hear personally, I would love to hear your thoughts about extending the sewer from Eastern Avenue to Bigelow along 96 and what that would entail, just to give us some ballpark idea to know if this is pie in the sky or if it's a realistic consideration.
Well, excuse me. Well, I guess it all comes down to dollars
Of
and,
course,
you know, what you want to see there. If it's just a line in the ground from Bigelow to Eastern Avenue, and that's all, that's fairly easy to do. There's a couple of other issues that come into play. As far as capacity, the plant's got enough capacity to handle the village without too much issue.
okay,
Yeah, there's going to be a question of equity buy-in to the plant because obviously the folks in Booth Bay did not pay anything to build the plant. So there's going to be a capacity issue that they have to purchase from the rest of the users.
and that would be the town of Booth Bay?
Well, I guess it would be whoever's going to spearhead the sewer.
Okay, yep, okay,
You know, be it the town of Booth Bay
or New England Aquaventus.
right. But you know, the district's going to be looking to somebody to, you know, pay for that equity buy-in.
Do you have any idea what that would be?
I have no idea what that would be. It would, sewer is not going to be a quick turnaround, unfortunately, whereas water is fairly simple. You figure out fire flow, you size your pipe, off you go, and you build it. As long as you have capacity in the plant to serve the line. Sewer, on the other hand, you got to determine what kind of sewer you're going to put in. Is it going to be a traditional gravity pump station system, which the majority of Booth Bay Harbor is? You sewer from a high point to a low point, you pump it up to a high point, and it flows downhill toward the
Right.
plant. There's another option where each homeowner could have a pump station and feed into a common main that pumps all the way to Eastern Avenue. The problem with that kind of a system is the onus of maintenance falls on the homeowner.
Got it.
McCowan Point, Squirrel Island, and Capitol Island have those kinds of systems in place. They work very well, but somebody's got to maintain it. And all those pump stations are on everybody's property. So the homeowner is going to be saddled with paying for a pump station to operate and maintain.
That sounds like a
No,
deal
that's not,
breaker.
yeah, that's not gonna work.
That's definitely not gonna work. I don't think.
But it's a lot less expensive to install. A lot less.
Oh, well then if,
Okay, so if there was a fund to help offset those costs for homeowners as part of it, that
That
might
might
make
be-
it more palatable.
Right. That could be the carrot, that you dangle out in front of folks. A
How long does
typical,
that hurt?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is it in perpetuity? I mean, is it, what's the,
Well, I mean, that would
No.
have to be
be part of it?
determined.
those kinds of pump stations typically run today's dollars, will probably run anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000, depending on how much ledge is involved. However, in East Booth Bay, everybody has a septic tank, just about, or an overboard discharge system.
Right,
So those pump stations can be placed where those existing facilities are. You
okay,
just need a force main from that station to tie into a main header, if you will. Say like on School Street, you're going to put a main pipe down School Street. Everybody's going to feed into that pipe. But there's some engineering costs that are going to have to come into play.
yeah,
To design that system, because everything is based on pressure. And it's low flow. That kind of a system is low flow, which means because of the distance from Bigelow to Eastern Avenue, there's going to be a high chance of septicity going on in the force main because you're just not going to move that much water.
Hey, Chris, is putting together a document with some estimates on pricing on this, something that you could do for the group?
I would have to go to an engineer to get that information.
Right, which would have a cost.
Because at least when we were talking about it, early on with Dan Breyer, Dan seemed very in favor of the sewer because apparently he's been trying to get it expanded, and yet it's the people having to tie into it, which is cost them money. That's been the
Right.
big holdup in a lot of different places.
Sure.
And so and yet to install the whole system, when I talked briefly to Chris Wiseman, he was like, I don't think we can, we could do the whole system. But Dan said there's a lot of funding right now in some of these stimulus packages or care packages to do that. If we could get some funding to help do kind of the big stuff, and then the Aquaventus funds were going to defer all the costs for people that were involved, that might, but not knowing, I mean,
Yeah.
$5,000 to $8,000 doesn't
I have
sound
a
like
hard
bad.
time the taxpayers' money having to pay for anything related to this project. That does not sit well with me. I don't know how that will sit with other people.
Well, but the sewer would be something that you're looking for the
That would improve the whole region
federal,
for,
right.
I agree with that.
perpetuity.
I agree with that, but there's
So,
gonna be a lot of money made because of this project, so. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of profit that's gonna be made that could.
not from this particular project. I think if offshore wind takes off and they put in huge arrays, people will make a lot of money somewhere. But this is one research turbine. So
and I think at this point, like in specifically talking about sewer, we're looking at what are the health and safety benefits that we can provide the towns, and getting rid of overboard discharge has a benefit for
That would
the
be amazing.
entire area.
I would love.
And so if there's federal funding that could help both towns cover the cost in the respective towns,
yeah, it's there. Somebody's
with
gonna
a
get it.
partnership with Aquaventus to cover homeowner costs, so there's no homeowner costs up front, then that becomes a much more viable option. It's not a viable option if you thought Aquaventus was gonna cover the whole cost. Just probably not realistic.
Yeah,
That's my thought.
DEP's not even going to give you much help. As far as grant funding, you might be able to get some grant funding with some through SRF with some principal forgiveness, just as like the water district got for the Ocean Point Loop.
What does
Um,
SRF
I have
stand
no
for?
idea what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, Nell understands what that is.
But I can't tell you what it stands for.
But
SRF.
SRF is a revolving loan fund that
Right.
is funded through EPA and state bonds that match. I think it's a 5-to-1 match. For every state dollar, there's 5 federal dollars that goes into the state revolving loan fund,
And then
which
there's
is
loan
administered by
forgiveness.
DEP.
Okay.
So we put in for our seawall around the plant for climate resiliency. We went to the state and put in an application to fund that project. They did not give us any grant funding or principal forgiveness. They gave us a low interest loan. So we said, no, thank you.
Yeah,
So we kept looking and we found ARPA money
right.
through Maine DOT. And they funded 4.01 million of the project. We have to kick in 300. And I got 200,000 from the county for engineering costs with their ARPA money. So, there's funding out there. It's just, if there's any debt incurred, the question becomes who pays for the debt.
Right, and in this
Yeah.
question, our expectation would be that Aquaventus would pay for the debt and it wouldn't go
Right.
on the towns.
Otherwise, I think it's
Otherwise, you know,
a deal breaker.
we're
like it's been
assuming
in
the towns
past.
would vote against it. They might
Mhm.
not, but my expectation is that they likely would. So let me ask another question, Chris. If we were to decide to explore this further, and we need that engineering study, obviously, in order to have just even a ballpark figure to be able to go look at grants, what does the engineering study typically cost?
Well, for a project of that size, looking at two options, I would say somewhere around $50,000 to $75,000. And I
So-
might be a little low.
And that's for looking at, that would include all of the specs and the drawings and the, down to the last.
No, that would probably
No?
get you an evaluation report.
I was
Okay,
just gonna
so
say.
that's, I just want to make sure that we get that very clear.
Yeah, no, that would be for a preliminary report.
Okay,
I have a question. Would it be possible to do part of the project now, like to install the big pipe going into town and then 10 years down the road when the rest of the funding has been collected to tie in?
Well, I think
You
the idea would be when they're burying the cable,
To put the big pipe in,
To
right?
put the
That's
big
what I'm
pipe in,
asking. If
and
we can
then-
do that right now
and
and then
then
do the individual.
presumably
that's-
Aquaventus would cover all of that because they're already, now it's a big difference. I'm talking about things I don't completely understand, from
Right.
putting in the small
Small.
cable itself to a sewer line.
Mhm.
it's really the depth that's the issue. So the cable doesn't need to go that deep with my
No,
understanding.
and it's just like a trenching kind of thing. So, but they're gonna be opening up the street, so why not?
Well, just as far as like from the engineer's standpoint, do we need to have that plan in place before we even install the big sewer pipe?
You definitely have to decide on what kind of system's going to go in place,
Right,
because it's two different construction methods, totally different.
so,
If
go ahead, Chris.
I said, if you're going to look at that low flow, high head system, similar to Squirrel Island, Capitol Island, etc., you have to be 5 feet deep so it doesn't freeze. The engineers would have to take a look at flow, potential flow from the area, to size that force main properly, so we can maintain the proper velocity inside of that pipe, so stuff does not fall out when water
From
moves.
5 feet though, that's gonna be blasting, right? And isn't
Yeah.
there's a
Oh,
huge
sure.
blasting that.
Yeah.
that might
But
be.
you gotta remember, if Aquaventus is gonna put a cable in the ground, they're gonna be probably at least 3 feet anyway. They're not gonna blast to 2 feet and that's it. They're gonna have some overblast in that cable.
Yeah.
For that trench. So, obviously the trench width now becomes a question. You know, how wide a trench are they gonna blast all along Route 96? They're gonna take half the road? Are they just gonna take 4 feet? You know, those are the kinds of questions that have to be answered first.
Right,
Then
okay,
decide what kind of system the town wants to build.
okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. Trish, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick note. I remember when they had the meeting at the Y with Aquaventus, that they had said that the trench that they were going to dig was 18 by 18 inches. So
Yeah, it's not big, so the sewer would be a completely different animal.
it would be very much deeper than that, because I was like, that sounds not very deep at all.
That's at a minimum. 18 inches would be at a minimum, and that would have to be encased in concrete
So, you
If
know,
it's- if it's 18 inches.
to not try to get into the weeds on this, I mean, it could be, if this is what the community thinks is a high priority, after we go through all the various things, then, I mean, I think the thing is to ask Aquaventus to pay for that study and look into it. But if it's not, if that's not what people want, then, because.
I want it
It's-
all.
But that does, I mean, in looking at all those various things, that's the biggest ticket item and the most complex one.
Yeah.
Based on my understanding.
Well, I think
Absolutely.
it's important to do the study anyway, even if they don't do it. If we want to put a sewer line in after this thing is in the ground, we need to know where to put our sewer line. So we're, so they can plan around our future sewer line,
Right.
like it can't be in our way. We don't
Yeah.
want to be down.
That's a good point.
So another question, Chris. Is it compatible to run the sewer in the same trench with enough distance between the sewer and the cable?
Well, quite frankly, if I had to work on that main, I'd want to be as far away from that cable as possible.
Okay, that's what I thought.
But I would envision that electric cable would be on one side of the road and probably offset another 6 feet at least would be either sewer or water, and then another 5 or 6 feet would be either sewer or water.
So that's
So
really,
you
really-
kind of have 3 trenches in that road. So you
Right.
have water existing, so the water's already there. So
Right.
you gotta work around the water. You have storm drainage that's already there. You have to work around it. Those roads are not very wide. I know in the preliminary meetings that I sat in with Duncan early on with Dan and John Ziagra, distance or separation was a concern.
Uh-huh.
You know, from probably Virginia Street back to Eastern Avenue, the road's fairly wide and it's wide enough to maintain plenty of distance. But when you get in the village, it gets pretty
Right.
tight.
It's very tight.
Hmm.
Water and sewer can be 5 feet apart, benched, meaning we have to be 18 inches lower than the water line. So if the water line's at 5 feet, we have to be 18 inches lower, but we can be horizontally 5 feet from the water line. Power, and I think Zig would probably agree that we'd probably want to be as far away from that as we could, especially if we had to dig and cross it.
Right, right. And I think that was something when they did the original exploration for where the line was, they did encounter the water line in a couple of places.
Yeah. And that could be a tough, I don't think we could, if that electric line was going to go in the ground, I don't know as we could stop it from being any closer than 5 feet
Okay,
legally. But I may be speaking out of school. DHHS has circuit recommendations for separation of pipeline. If it's in
Okay.
the same plane, it's 10 feet. Same trench, it's got to be at least 5 feet, and we have to be deeper.
right.
It's huge.
It's good information. I so appreciate your coming to the meeting so we could
Yeah.
hear about it.
I have a question, but I don't know if anyone would have the answer. What if going forward, this part of the town decides they do want sewer and this electrical pipe makes the design impossible?
Well, that's what Allison is saying. Where they put that pipe needs to
I understand.
allow for future,
Yeah,
for future.
but is that built
expansion.
has anyone even discussed this yet? I feel like,
No. I
no.
don't think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
very
feel like we just need to make that a priority, that they do hire the
It
engineer
sounds
to
like that
design
study,
the.
it has to happen no
It
matter
has to
what,
happen.
whether or not we
Yeah.
have to put the sewer in or not.
Yeah, and
So-
determine what kind of system's going to go in, because it will make a difference.
Right,
Well, actually, then maybe you spec out both of them so that
Well, you
which
could.
one-
You would want to do that in that evaluation. You would want to look at both numbers, but I can tell you that a traditional gravity system will probably be twice as much
Right.
to install.
And if, let's say, the funding was enough to take the line from Eastern Avenue to Bigelow, but folks down Bayville or down Tallwoods, or down School Street, wanted sewer to come down there, can they do it at a later date? Would all the
Yes.
fittings would be put in place so that it was sized for the number of residences or businesses that were on any particular stretch?
That's correct. They, during that preliminary engineering report, we would request that they design out for future use.
Okay,
And then, and probably a safety factor of at least 2 or 3 on top of that for
Ah,
real future use.
right,
Um,
right. For
But yeah,
development,
every road that it would go by, I would expect that there would be provisions with a T and a stub
right.
at each road. Because I know that there is interest in Bayville.
Right, and so I could see that, Bayville might be like Squirrel or Capitol Island, where they get together and say, yes, we really want to tie into this. It's not funded, but we'll do our own funding for this piece of it because we want to do this,
Yes, and where they're a village corporation,
right?
anyway, and they have a primary treatment plant, which EPA wants to go away.
Right,
DEP wants it to go away. So there may be some impetus on the federal and state levels to fund or help them fund getting that to happen.
so Bayville has that.
Bayville has a treatment plant, but
What
it's a
about,
primary treatment plant.
what about Tall Woods?
I'm not sure. I think mostly
Okay.
everything in there is probably on-site systems.
Okay. And then Washburn and Lobsterman,
They have overboard discharges, I believe.
right, right. Yeah, there's a number of overboard discharge right as you come into the village there.
Right. The old Spring House has an overboard discharge
Yeah,
that
Well,
runs
and-
down the road.
and the ones that are right on the pond side.
Yep.
Jana Day and
Yes.
yeah,
So yeah, if the state would come through with some dollars, they used to have a removal program, but that went away back in, I think, 2001 or 2, where they actually funded 75% of the removal.
so is there any state or federal funding available for the engineering study?
Perhaps, probably through the SRF fund, an
Okay,
application would have to be put in to DEP, and I'm sure they would probably consider funding that.
and that application would have to come from the sewer district itself, yes?
Oh, that would come directly from DEP. That
That
would be direct to DEP. So whoever, I mean, the town can do that, anybody can do that.
Okay, so a community group can do that?
Yep. Well, a community group, I'm not so
Yeah.
sure about that. I know the town could.
Well, we're a community group, so it would have to be the 2 towns. And then Aquaventus would pay anything that they didn't forgive.
Right.
We don't want the taxpayers, but rather than saying to Aquaventus, just pay for it, if there are state or federal funds available
Well, there is, but I'm not sure if they're grant funds.
to do, right, well, but that's the thing, is that they would need to be explored. That if there were state or federal funds and they had loan forgiveness for a portion, then have Aquaventus paid the remainder, so there's no cost to the towns
Right.
and the
I think that-
taxpayers.
I think that may be doable for the entire project, but I'm not so sure about the engineering review.
Okay, that's good information, thank you.
It also seems that the more we can get state or federal dollars to pay for, the more money could go, the Aquaventus money could go to get it into individual houses, right?
Right.
Because that I don't think federal dollars will pay for.
No, they won't fund anything.
Something
on
that serves the whole community, but not an individual household. So if
That's-
that's what Aquaventus is picking up along the way.
But no, early conversations that we had with Duncan and Dan, they were looking to the sewer district for help in getting USDA funds.
Uh-huh,
And we have no, And I told Dan, we had no problem pursuing those funds. However, if there's debt incurred, the sewer district's not going to be on the hook for that debt.
Right, right. So there would have to be a formal agreement with Aquaventus so that the sewer district had assurance that they were not going to be on the hook for that debt.
Right. So
Okay.
you'd have to have some kind of an intermunicipal agreement or something to that effect to
Okay,
ensure that bond counsel was happy with how the repayment terms were.
fine with it. Yeah. Trish?
This could get complicated.
Yeah,
And just as a side note, Chris is right. A private group can't apply for that kind of grant. We had a similar situation over with the siphon in West Harbor Pond.
yeah,
That organization had come to the town of Boothbay to help basically co-sign kind of situation, because a private entity can't do it.
Okay.
So you would have to look into seeing a municipality or maybe the sewer district themselves do it or something like that.
okay, thank you, Trish.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, we've got 8 minutes left. We've made a tiny little bit of progress, and that's the name of the game here. is it's
Yeah,
baby
but I think
steps.
that's the big, that's
That
gonna
was-
be
that
the
was
most
really helpful.
complicated, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna throw a wrench in the works to say, you know, are we gonna go for what we get the biggest bang for the buck? Or are we gonna go for low hanging fruit? Next meeting, let's talk about low hanging fruit, because I think that'll be easier while we all ponder this piece of it.
Is there any reason not to go for all of it? I mean, I know that there's a cap on price. I'm just saying, while the road is ripped up, why not look
No,
at some of
no,
this?
that's
Yeah,
why
I
we're
think
making
some
the
of-
list. The list is
Yeah.
open ended.
Package, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, when they put it back together, why not put in a bike lane, right?
Right.
So that's,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the.
but I think if
cheapest
that's
time to
what
do
we
it.
ask for, we're selling ourselves way short.
Yes, but so one of the other discussions in terms of like the electric utility improvements were burying all the power lines along 96 so that, you know, when you have winter storms and stuff, you don't have outages as much. So that's another health and safety issue. Go ahead, Trish.
I'm just curious, is the intent of the group to invite people here to discuss how, you know, how we could utilize this funding? I'm
Yes,
kind of, is that the point?
Yeah.
Because I know I had mentioned the school.
yes.
I don't know if you want the superintendent to come to talk.
So the parameters we were given were health and safety of the community. So that's the primary focus.
Okay.
So it would have to fit within that. That was what Aquaventus said. It had to be, and I'm paraphrasing what Rob said, but
Yeah, I think the idea also was the town is going to experience disruption because they're ripping up the road. So if there are things that are associated with the environment and health and safety that could happen while they're already doing that, it's kind of a payback to the community for the disruption. So that's why I think a lot of these things landed on the list.
right. But Rob also said that he was being as vague as possible because he wanted the community to come forward with whatever was of interest to them. So it's certainly reasonable, Trish, to have whether it's a superintendent or someone else from the school come and put forward something else. And the goal is that we get this matrix done, present it to the community, and there's prioritization. So this is the first choice, second choice, on down the line. And then we start negotiations with Aquaventus based on all the factors, like, do we need outside funding? Do we need to involve both municipalities? All of those issues. So they have not given a dollar amount. They're waiting for us to have a list. And we are looking for community input about creating that list. So, you know, and for us to be able to do the matrix, we need to have expert information like what Chris provided in order to have the matrix completed enough so that people can make a reasoned decision about whether it's feasible.
So we
can
should
talk about
decide,
that.
we should decide what we want to discuss next so that we can
Right.
have the Chris equivalent. Because if we discuss
Right.
sewers without him,
Yeah,
we would have gotten
right. Right.
nowhere.
So if you'd like, I can talk to Robert Kaler, he's the superintendent, and see if he would entertain coming to one of these meetings and maybe put in his pitch, I guess, or answer questions. Do you want me to line that up?
Yeah, so that sounds good, Trish, and you could just tell him that we're meeting the first and third Thursday. And if there's a particular date that works better, and so he knows what the purpose of the group is, so he can be thinking about what the ask might be. And come with a specific ask, so that we can add it to the matrix,
Okay,
all right?
I
And
can do that.
anybody else that anyone thinks about, from the towns, anyone you know in your community, or yourselves, if you think of something new.
Do we want to pick a couple of other things? Like what's the next one?
Well, the road and traffic improvements, which are pretty,
Yeah, those strike me as,
they should
Pretty-
happen anyway.
and they would, when they are putting the road back together, could they, but on
Right.
the other hand, sewer was a whole lot more complicated than I thought.
And
I
then the
actually know
electric
something about
electric
sewers.
utility improvements is another big one, so burying the power
Maybe.
lines from the substation to Bigelow. And I don't know who would be the expert for that, CMP, yeah.
We want to try to do that one the next meeting.
I would suggest that be for September, because it's August, and we might get more people, and to do the low hanging fruit for the next meeting.
Okay,
So that if we don't have a robust group.
Yeah.
And then we can do any follow-up questions about
There's a couple community members on School Street that work for CMP that might be willing, they're be knowledgeable too.
and
It
there's,
has to be a
but,
specific department or something, but
well, they would know who to contact,
Yeah,
I'll
probably.
ask them. I'll
That
so
would be
who
great.
would get who, Vida,
DOT
DOT is for
for
the,
Yes,
anybody know anybody? in DOT?
I don't
You
know.
You could contact, or I can contact Julia for a contact to MDOT if you
That
want.
would be great. That would be great, because I know when those speed humps went in East Boothbay, it was a state road. There was no vote on it by the town. It was a big brouhaha. And so, knowing what the process is for those improvements, because they seem like they're an obvious thing to do at the same time. But there's a process, so we need to know what that process is, so we don't put things in first and then have to rip them out because the process wasn't followed.
Like phone calls and sidewalk and then sidewalk.
Yep. Okay, we are at 5:59. We will have to get back to everybody about the location for the next meeting. Hopefully it will be at the YMCA. And I think we should keep the sewer on the discussion to see whether we're gonna actually make a formal ask. After everybody's had time to kind of think about it and other people have had a chance to either view the video or.
You know, now hearing about that, it's like, God, it's almost like now or never.
Yes,
Yeah.
Well, I feel like if they're gonna be digging up the road and putting in these power lines, they have to do the study no matter what, because if we ever do wanna put in this
yeah.
fix the problems with all the overboard
Yeah.
discharge, like
Yeah, that needs to be an option.
they need to stay clear of where that
Yeah.
needs to go.
Right. Can you take that back and I'm assuming that's. Okay.
all right, anything else before we close? I'm gonna leave the recording until people are saying goodbye, just to make sure we don't miss any important tidbit.
Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I'll try to make a better effort to attend.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
You
Thank
were
so
here, what
much.
do you mean? You're here, you're good.
First couple.
Yeah, all right.
Thank
Have a good evening, everybody.
All right,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
So the question you want